The mountain road wound like a ribbon of black silk, wet from last night's rain, its asphalt slick and uneven. Mist clung stubbornly to the firs, curling around their trunks, rising in thin, ghostly plumes from the forest floor. Calvin drove cautiously, fingers taut on the steering wheel, knuckles white beneath the dim glow of the dashboard. Beside him, Serena hunched over her phone, tracing the GPS with a stubborn attentiveness, though the map flickered erratically, as if resisting their journey. Behind them, Rowan leaned against the window, arms crossed, face pale in the reflected mist, eyes flitting between the darkened trees and the road. "We should have stopped hours ago," Serena muttered, voice low and uneven. Her words sounded almost wrong in the quiet, as though they might echo through the trees and wake something. "The map says the survey point is just beyond the ridge, but—" She trailed off, tension curling her shoulders as her gaze fixed on a shadow ahead. Calvin squinted, gripping the wheel tighter. "What is it?" "A tunnel," Serena said, voice barely audible. At first, it was just a hollow carved into the mountainside, easily mistaken for a shadow. Then the faintest glow began to bleed from its mouth. Pulsed, slow, uneven, like a heartbeat, deliberate, hesitant, as though something alive slept just beyond the stone. "Someone left a light on inside?" Rowan asked, though his tone lacked certainty, the question more a plea to anchor reality than curiosity. "No," Calvin said, voice steady, but his own chest betrayed him, tight and uneven. "That isn't normal. Look at it. It's alive." Somehow, the jeep slowed without thought. The forest fell silent behind them, the wind itself seeming to halt. Leaves trembled but did not fall. Mist hung midair, curling as if frozen in anticipation. Another pulse of the tunnel brushed the car, a subtle, tangible pressure against their skin, radiating warmth that felt intrusive, like a hand reaching into their chest. The air thickened, sticky, as if it had substance, curling around their clothes and hair. "Maybe we should turn back," Rowan said softly, voice nearly swallowed by the stillness. Serena shook her head, tight-lipped. "No, we're here. The survey point is inside that ridge. We've come too far to leave now." Another pulse, stronger this time, rippled along the road, vibrating through bone and muscle. Calvin realized his heartbeat had begun syncing with it, a slow, deliberate rhythm that seemed to rise and fall in tandem with the tunnel's breathing. His lungs lifted and fell unconsciously, responding to the inhale and exhale of something vast, something patient. They stopped at the edge of the tunnel. The glow now had depth, almost liquid, moving in waves along the rock, stretching and contracting as though breathing through the stone itself. Calvin stepped out first, boots crunching wet gravel. The light seemed to recoil slightly, as if it had noticed him, evaluating. "Feels hot," he murmured, raising a hand toward the mouth of the tunnel. The air shivered, radiating warmth in subtle pulses, carrying a faint metallic tang. It lingered in his nostrils, coppery, sharp, and alive. Rowan swallowed, glancing at Serena. "Not just heat. It's aware, like it's waiting, watching." "What do you mean, aware?" Serena asked, voice tight. "I don't know," Rowan admitted. "It's like something inside wants us to notice it, to acknowledge it. I can feel it." Calvin leaned forward, peering into the tunnel. Wet stone, slick and black, shimmered faintly with the strange luminescence. Faint lines appeared beneath the surface, subtle veins in the rock. The pulse traveled along them in slow, deliberate waves, spreading outward like the thrum of a living creature. Beyond the glow, darkness stretched and quivered, expanding and contracting in rhythm with the pulse, like lungs beneath the stone. "Maybe it's just a mineral reaction," Serena said, though she sounded unsure even to herself. "Minerals don't breathe. They don't watch. Look at it, the way it moves. The patterns shift. The light stretches and contracts like something alive." Then it made a sound, a soft, wet clicking, like brittle fingernails brushing over skin. Not echoing, not bouncing off stone, resonating directly inside their skulls. The pulse quickened, tugging at Calvin's chest with subtle insistence, a pull that made him feel exposed, small. Rowan's flashlight trembled in his hands. "It's wet, warm, alive," he said, each word hollow, strange even to him. Another wave of pressure swept over them, brushing along the jeep, vibrating through their bones, tugging at their clothing. Serena stumbled, clutching the roof, breathing unevenly. "It doesn't want us to enter," she whispered. "No," Calvin said, voice low. "It wants attention. Something in there wants us to see it." Another pulse. The glow contracted into a thin, steady line at the center, deliberate and watchful. The veins on the walls stretched and twisted, extending along the stone, contracting with a logic they couldn't comprehend. Calvin thought he saw forms at the edges of perception. Abstract, mask-like faces, flickering and retreating as though hiding just beyond focus. I don't like this," Rowan said. "It's not an animal. Not anything I know. Something else. Something patient. Something old." The air shifted again, heavier now, pressing against their shoulders and faces, tugging at hair and clothing. Calvin's stomach rolled slightly. The fog outside shimmered unnaturally, stretching around the trees and the road as though the mountain itself bent space. Serena whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe it doesn't want us to enter. Maybe it wants acknowledgement. A moment of recognition." Calvin nodded slowly, feeling the pulse settle in rhythm with his own heartbeat. "We're not going in. Not tonight. Not ever." Rowan raised the flashlight once more, sweeping the beam across the walls. The veins shimmered like living circuitry, rising and falling with the pulse, stretching along the wet stone. Calvin felt the pressure tug at his chest again, subtle but insistent, a heartbeat within a heartbeat. He realized he was breathing in sync with the mountain itself, lungs lifting and falling as if the tunnel commanded his body. They climbed back into the jeep. The engine remained off. The mist twisted outside, curling and rising, carrying the faint glow with it like threads of light suspended in air. When Calvin finally turned the key, the jeep rolled backward slowly, leaving the tunnel behind. Even as the glow receded, it lingered faintly, pulsing in rhythm with their hearts. In the rearview mirror, Calvin could see it still watching, breathing, waiting. The mountain's heartbeat had sunk into theirs. Silence filled the jeep, thick and suffocating, stretching each second until it felt elastic. The fog clung to the car, swirling unnaturally, brushing the windows like thin fingers. Calvin realized they were no longer sure if the road behind them curved or twisted in impossible ways. The pulse, though dim, was still present in their ears, faint but insistent. Serena whispered, voice trembling, "It remembered us." Calvin kept his eyes on the rearview mirror. "And it'll remember us next time too. We haven't left. Not really. Not ever." Rowan shivered, sliding down slightly in his seat. Maybe it waits. Maybe it's always been waiting, and it never forgets. Maybe that's what this place is. The jeep continued along the mountain road, tires slipping slightly on wet asphalt. The mist thickened, swallowing them slowly, folding the world behind them into gray and shadow. Somewhere in the mountains, the pulse continued, steady, deliberate. Beneath stone and soil, it breathed patient, waiting, watching. And somewhere, deep in the tunnels, in shapes too abstract to name, it knew they had seen it, and that knowledge would linger long after the road had vanished from memory. The highway was a thin ribbon of silver under the moonlight, flanked by trees so close together they seemed to touch across the asphalt. The air carried that sharp, almost metallic scent that comes after the first frost, and the engine's hum was the only sound cutting through the night. I sat behind the wheel of Claire's old Honda, fingers drumming nervously against the steering wheel, while the others watched the forest swallow the roadside in darkness. "Feels like we've been driving forever," said Tom, sprawled in the passenger seat, his voice heavy with exhaustion. He rubbed his jaw and squinted through the windshield, though there was nothing to see beyond the curve ahead. Are we even on the right road? Claire, in the back with her notebook open on her lap, tapped the pen thoughtfully against the paper. GPS says yes, but this part of Route 77 is like a ghost road. Sometimes it disappears on the maps. Her tone wasn't joking. It carried a quiet unease that made my stomach tighten. Mark, leaning over her shoulder, pointed to the distance. Look, mile marker up there. We should pass it in a second. I squinted. The metal post rose from the shoulder like a sentinel, coated in the grime and rust of years. But something about it made my heart stutter. The number scratched across its surface wasn't right. Or rather, it was familiar. My initials, L, had been carved into the metal, jagged and uneven, as if by a knife that had tasted impatience and malice. I froze, hand on the wheel. That's my initials. Tom laughed, though it was uneasy. Come on. Maybe someone just thought it'd be funny. Spray painting or carving initials is a thing. It's not spray paint, I said, voice tight. The letters glinted faintly in the moonlight, sharp and raw. They're scratched in. Metal, not paint. Claire leaned forward. EL? Those are your initials. I nodded, the cold crawling up my spine. Yeah, but we just passed the last mile marker. It wasn't. There's no way anyone could have done this so fast. My pulse quickened. It was impossible. The markers are spaced a mile apart. We'd just come from one 15 minutes ago. Mark snorted. Maybe someone followed us from the last town. Road vigilantes or something. Relax, man. I didn't relax. Couldn't. The hairs on my arms prickled, and the road ahead felt narrower, almost leaning toward us. I tightened my grip on the wheel. A sound scraped through the night, the faint hiss of metal against metal or maybe nails on glass. I blinked. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Did you hear that? I asked. Tom scoffed, glancing around nervously. It's the wind, dude. These trees are old. They squeak. But it wasn't the trees. There was a rhythm to it, deliberate. A scraping that moved with us, keeping pace outside the window, never louder, never quieter, just constant, precise. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was walking just beyond the edges of our headlights. My mind darted to shadows that weren't ours, shapes that moved when we weren't looking. We drove on, mile marker after mile marker, each one unremarkable until the next one came into view. And my initials were there again. Fresh, deep, impossible. I slammed the brakes, tires squealing against the asphalt. Stop! Stop the car! Claire's notebook fell to the floor, pages fluttering like wounded birds. What is it? They're here, I stammered. My initials, scratched in the next mile marker. They're following me. Mark laughed, this time more forced. Okay. Yeah. That's unsettling. Tom's face went pale, his earlier bravado gone. No, that's really not okay. We should turn back. I don't like this. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. Turning back isn't an option. Something's waiting if we stop. I can feel it. The forest seemed to lean closer. Shadows pooled unnaturally in the ditches. The air grew colder, colder than it should have been, despite the late fall night. Frost dusted the edges of the road, shimmering faintly in the headlights, though we'd passed the same stretch moments ago without noticing it. Claire's voice broke the silence. Maybe it's not a person. Maybe it's... She hesitated, shivering. Maybe it's something else. I didn't respond. Couldn't. The next mile marker was coming up again, and my breath caught in my chest. It was different this time. The letters were deeper, wider, almost pulsating in the dim light. As we drew closer, the metal seemed to move, or at least the light on it did, as though the post itself was breathing. Tom's hands shook on his knees. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't. I slammed the car into neutral and stopped in the middle of the lane. The forest pressed against us like a living thing. The scraping sound was louder now, surrounding the car, circling us. What the hell is that? Mark whispered. I swallowed hard. It knows us. It knows me. The night air had gone silent, except for that scraping. No wind, no rustling leaves, no distant insects. Just the metal sound endlessly precise. I wanted to get out of the car, but the forest, the dark, it felt like it would consume me if I left the headlights. Claire whispered, "Maybe it only appears because we notice it. Maybe it's reactive." I looked at her, eyes wide. Reactive? To what? Her pen clicked against her notebook again. Fear, tension, recognition. Maybe it only exists when we see it. The words made my stomach twist. If she was right, then looking away wouldn't save us. We couldn't ignore it. It was part of me now, or I was part of it. The next marker loomed ahead. I couldn't stop myself from looking. This time it wasn't just my initials. They were carved across the metal like a warning, twisted and longer than before, with letters stretching impossibly. "Il. You can't hide." My hands went cold. Tom gasped, gripping the dashboard. Claire covered her mouth, eyes wide. Mark looked like he was about to vomit. The scraping ceased. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Then the road ahead seemed wrong. The lines warped, curving toward the treeline, as if the highway itself was bending. The headlights flickered. I tried the ignition. Nothing. The engine was dead and cold. The car was stuck in the middle of a road that no longer looked like the road we had been driving. A shadow moved across the lane ahead, impossibly tall, impossibly thin. It didn't step. It slid, silent and deliberate. Couldn't look away. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would betray us. "It knows you," Claire whispered. "It's yours." I tried to speak. My voice caught in my throat. I wanted to say something rational, something comforting. But words failed. The shadow drifted closer, and the mile marker behind it seemed to pulse with light, or maybe it was breathing. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the shadow receded. The engine coughed back to life. The headlights steadied. The highway returned to normal, or at least what we remembered as normal. I didn't stop driving. None of us spoke. Every now and then, my eyes flicked to the shoulder, half expecting another mile marker to be waiting, carved with my initials and something new. Somewhere behind us, I thought I heard the faint scrape of metal again. Slower this time, patient, waiting. By the time we reached the next town, the markers were normal, the forest ordinary. Streetlights flickered over cracked pavement, and the air smelled faintly of gasoline instead of frost. But I knew it hadn't stopped. It would always be there, waiting for recognition, tracing the miles in its own silent rhythm. And I would know it.